What would happen if an entire universe was hiding right next to you and no one had ever told you? You wake up, live your routine, make decisions. But what if, right now, somewhere that science still barely understands, another version of you was making completely different choices? A you that may never have been born here, but exists there. A you who may have already discovered all this before us. Imagine for a second, what if what we call reality is just one of billions? What if something is trying to show us this right now, but we're too busy to notice? Quantum physics has already raised this possibility, but what no one told you is that science stumbled onto something that shouldn't have appeared. Real data, signs, evidence, they were simply ignored. What has been discovered could change everything we know about time, space, and even who we are. But why isn't this in the headlines? Why doesn't anyone talk about this openly? And the most disturbing thing, what would really happen if it were true? Do you believe that the reality we live in is the only one? Or is there something bigger behind all this? Comment your theory below. Have you ever felt like something wasn't right? Ever get the feeling that the world around you seemed strange? I want to know your opinion, because what you're about to see in this video may make you question everything, including if this you who is watching now is really the original. There are scientists who believe that the signs have already appeared, and that we are ignoring what could be the greatest discovery in history. But the question is, why isn't this being publicized? The answer is closer than you think. What is a parallel universe, and why is it no longer just fiction? Imagine the universe as a page inside a gigantic book. Each page represents a reality with its own rules, physical laws, and possible paths. Now imagine that this book has no beginning or end. It is made up of infinite pages floating together, close together, but never touching. This is a simple way of visualizing the concept of parallel universes, realities that coexist with ours, but that follow different directions in time, space, and in the very logic of what is possible. For decades, this idea was treated as science, fiction. But with the advancement of cosmology and theoretical physics, the boundaries between speculation and possibility began to dissolve. Science began to seriously consider the concept of the multiverse, and today there are mathematical and physical models that consistently support this hypothesis. One of them is the so-called inflationary multiverse, which proposes that our universe is just one of the infinite bubbles that emerged after the Big Bang, each with unique properties. These bubbles would exist in parallel, forming an incomprehensibly vast cosmic structure. Another model is provided by string theory, which suggests the existence of additional dimensions beyond the four we know. These extra dimensions would allow different universes to exist as overlapping layers, invisible to each other, but physically real. And we still have many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett, who states that with each decision we make, the universe divides into different branches, creating alternative versions of reality in which each possible choice is made. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a mathematical model compatible with quantum mechanics. These theories have not yet been proven, but the simple fact that they are considered serious within the scientific community completely changes the way we should look at reality. The possibility of multiple universes is no longer an imaginative metaphor and has become an active field of study with real research, formulas, and experiments. But what if I told you that we have more than theories, and that the first clue appeared where no one expected it? There is a phenomenon detected by scientific instruments that does not fit into any traditional model. And that's exactly why many believe it could be the first sign of something much bigger than we imagined. For decades, the cosmic microwave background radiation was considered one of the most reliable pillars for understanding the origin and structure of the universe. It represents the echo of the Big Bang, spread throughout the cosmos. What was expected would be a homogeneous distribution, but what the satellites detected was something different, a subtle but significant asymmetry, as if a part of the universe was tilted, responding to a force that shouldn't be there. Data were recorded, models were adjusted, but no convincing explanation was accepted. The diversion is there. It's just not talked about. Another even more disconcerting case came from an experiment in Antarctica conducted by the ANITA project. The goal was to detect high-energy neutrinos coming from space. The problem is that some of them seem to emerge from the ground, reversing the physical logic. Neutrinos shouldn't cross the entire Earth and come out the other side as if nothing had happened. Some scientists have suggested that the behavior could indicate interactions with another layer of reality, something beyond our observable universe. But the idea was quickly treated as too speculative. There are also reports of gravitational events that appear briefly and disappear without a trace, as if unknown forces were manifesting themselves in regions where no activity should exist. In some cases, there are records of energy appearing in empty points in space, defying the most basic laws of conservation. These observations have been documented. They exist. But instead of becoming an object of broad discussion, they remain confined to technical articles and restricted debates. No headlines, no public alert. Nothing that provokes the reaction that we would normally have when faced with something so out of the norm. And this raises an inevitable question. If there really is something out there interfering with our universe, why isn't anyone talking about it? When you begin to realize that perhaps the reality we live in is not as stable as it seems, everything changes perspective. We are no longer talking about fiction, but about concrete data that has been ignored. From that point on, each discovery stops being just curious and starts being disturbing. That's why content like this matters. In a world full of distractions, investigating what is behind the visible requires attention, courage, and critical thinking. The like here represents more than a click. It signals that there is an audience that values the search for hidden truths, that understands the importance of questioning what has been presented to us as certain. It's his way of showing that this investigation needs to continue and that you are part of it. But these anomalies could be just the beginning. There are signs that we are not just facing unusual data, but real signs that another reality may be interfering with ours. And the most disturbing thing about it all is that perhaps we have already felt the effects without realizing it. The simple idea that a parallel universe could actually exist completely changes the way we understand reality. But what if it wasn't just a theoretical possibility? What if we had confirmation, clear, public, unquestionable, that another universe is right next to us, coexisting with ours in a structure greater than any human mind has ever conceived? The first rupture would be with the notion of individuality. For centuries, we have been taught to believe that our decisions define who we are, that we have the autonomy to build our destiny. But if parallel realities exist, each choice we make can generate a fork, creating alternative versions of ourselves, living completely different stories. This weakens the idea of free will as something absolute. The I making a decision here is not the only one possible. Somewhere, another version of you did exactly the opposite, and both versions are real. This possibility raises profound philosophical questions. If each version of your consciousness is living independently, what defines who you are? Is there one version truer than another? The you who watches this video now may just be one of the infinite manifestations of your own existence, conditioned by variables that are beyond your control. Religiously, the discovery of parallel universes would challenge the pillars of various beliefs. The idea of a single divine plan, a single timeline, a single judgment, all of this would be called into question. Faith, traditionally associated with the singularity of creation, would have to adapt to the multiplicity of reality. This does not mean a denial of spirituality, but rather a need for reformulation. And not all institutions would be prepared for this. In the existential field, the impact would be even more complex. For some, confirmation of the multiverse would bring freedom, the feeling that nothing is truly lost, that there are other versions of life where mistakes were avoided, tragedies did not happen, and opportunities were seized. For others, this would be unbearable, knowing that better or worse existences are being lived by versions of oneself can become an obsession, a continual source of anxiety and comparison. Acceptance of this reality would require a complete reconstruction of the way we understand identity, purpose, and even the idea of destiny itself. We wouldn't just be changing our scientific perspective, we would be changing our place in the universe, literally. Have you ever stopped to think about who you would be if you had made different choices? Or better, do you think there's another version of you living exactly that alternative life right now, somewhere we can't see? Does this idea scare you or comfort you? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know how you interpret all of this. Do you believe there are multiple versions of us, or do you believe that this theory is just an attempt to make sense of what we still cannot explain? Your vision matters and can open up paths of reflection that more people need to know about. And as strange as it may seem, there are records that suggest this is not just a question of belief, but of evidence. And the most disturbing thing is that part of this evidence does not come from abstract theories, but from observations that are much more concrete than one might imagine. Not every scientific discovery is celebrated. Some are feared, especially when they challenge consolidated structures of thought, or when they require such a profound reformulation of reality that we simply don't know where to start. Parallel universes fall exactly into this category. For many physicists, the possibility of multiple universes is not a problem of logic, but of feasibility. How can we validate something that, by definition, can exist outside our observational reach? How can we study a universe that does not interact directly with ours, whose laws may be completely different, and which may not even share the same temporal structure? That's the dilemma. And that is why, even among scientists, this type of theory is viewed with caution. At conferences, the subject is discussed seriously, but outside of them, it is often treated as something too speculative to justify funding or space in the most prestigious journals. Theories that involve parallel realities are classified as borderline. They are on the threshold between theoretical physics and the terrain of the improbable, but this reluctance does not just come from the absence of direct evidence. There is a little discussed concept known as paradox of revelation, the idea that some truths are so great, so disruptive, that the simple act of revealing them can generate a collapse in collective understanding. Not because they are false, but because they are too disturbing. Confirming the existence of another universe, not as a hypothesis, but as a fact, would require reconstructing everything we understand about identity, causality, time, religion, science, history, and even morality. It's such a broad impact that it may be more comfortable to ignore the evidence than to try to absorb the consequences. Science has always sought answers, but not all answers come with a manual. Some just appear, and when they appear, they force us to decide, accept what's in front of us, or pretend we never saw it. But what if the truth has already been revealed and just ignored? Not every impact from a possible parallel universe needs to be grand, cosmic, or detectable in the laboratory. Sometimes the most disturbing effect can be precisely in what seems small, everyday, and inexplicable. There are moments when reality presents flaws, moments that don't fit together, coincidences that seem too calculated, situations that defy our own internal logic. How many times have you had the feeling that something happened before, even though you were sure it was the first time? Déjà vu is a widely recorded but still poorly understood phenomenon. The most accepted explanation involves brain processing failures. But there is a theoretical line that suggests something bolder. What if déjà vu is the reflection of a temporary overlap between two very similar realities, and in a brief instant you had access to what is happening in another version of the universe? And that nagging feeling that something has changed, but you can't explain what. Small details of the environment, memories that differ from common facts, memories that don't seem to fit into the timeline. Some call this the Mandela effect, when entire groups remember something differently from the recorded reality. But some physicists speculate that these errors could be signs of instability between layers of parallel realities. The idea that we live in a simulation has already been discussed by great names in modern science. But there are those who go further. Perhaps it is not a simulation in the computational sense, but an interdimensional network where realities coexist in tension and sometimes intersect. Have you ever felt like you were living something that already happened? Maybe you are. What if these failures are not random? What if the world around you is already showing signs that something much bigger is in motion? Perhaps the discomfort you feel at certain moments in your everyday life is not just psychological. Maybe it's a reality leak. What do the most recent studies say? Despite seeming like an idea far from practical reality, the existence of parallel universes is a recurring theme in cutting-edge research centers. One of the most discussed examples comes from CERN, where the Large Hadron Collider, LHC, performs particle collisions at very high energies. The main objective is to investigate the deeper structure of matter, but in certain experiments, what we are looking for goes further. Signs that subatomic particles may disappear momentarily or behave in a way not predicted by known laws. One of the hypotheses raised by physicists involved in these projects is that these particles could be temporarily escaping to other dimensions. This would require a much more complex structure of the universe than we imagine, with additional dimensions. In addition to the four that we perceive: height, width, depth, and time. The string theory, one of the most promising candidates for the unification of the forces of nature, predicts precisely this: the existence of up to 11 dimensions. Within this model, our universe would be a dam, a kind of three-dimensional membrane floating in a multi-dimensional space. And if there are other branes nearby, the collision between them could give rise to extreme cosmic events, including the Big Bang itself. This theory, known as ekpyrotic model, is taken seriously by several researchers and offers a possible explanation for the origin of our universe without resorting to an absolute beginning. Scientists like Max Tegmark classify the multiverse into levels, from simple variations in physical constants to mathematically independent realities. For him, the existence of multiple universes is not just plausible, it is inevitable. Brian Greene, an advocate of string theory, also claims that parallel universes are a natural consequence of the mathematics behind extra dimensions. Already, Sean Carroll emphasizes that in quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation is a valid and elegant solution to problems of internal coherence. None of these models are consensus, but they all have a solid mathematical basis, derived from accepted and actively explored theories. Science is slowly building theoretical bridges that connect the idea of the multiverse to real observations and equations. We are still far from definitive proof, but the path is being charted, and it points to something bigger, stranger, and more real than fiction ever imagined. There are people out there who still think this is all just fiction, that these theories are exaggeration or fantasy. But now you know that's not the case, and this information should not be restricted to a few. Sharing this video is participating in something bigger, a group that sees beyond the obvious, that seeks answers where most people don't even dare to ask questions. Send it now to that friend who loves exploring the mysteries of the universe, the one who always raises strange theories in conversations, who questions time, reality, and everything that surrounds us. This is the time to spread this discussion, because what has been revealed here can awaken more consciousness than you imagine. Share and help bring this knowledge to those who also feel that something much bigger is happening, even if they still don't know how to explain it. Now imagine that parallel universes are not just silent neighbors. Imagine that they can move, expand, and collide. According to some versions of string theory, each universe is a membrane floating in a multi-dimensional space. And when two of these brains collide, the consequences can be catastrophic. There are those who argue that our Big Bang was precisely the result of a collision of this type. This scenario raises even more disturbing hypotheses. A collision between universes could cause distortions in time, changes in gravity, or even complete disruptions to the laws of physics as we know it. Some theories suggest that black holes, instead of just being regions of gravitational collapse, could function as connections between these realities, true interdimensional passages where the boundaries of space-time break. If these structures are real, not only could we be connected to other universes, we could be swallowed by them. Now imagine that your universe is just a draft, and the original is about to swallow us. What if this is all real? What if the signs, the anomalies, the ignored patterns are pointing to something we don't want to face? Perhaps we are facing the greatest discovery in the history of humanity, but we are pretending not to see it because we are not ready to deal with what it represents. Now think, what if it was possible to cross? If there was a path, a fault, a passage, would you leave it all behind? Would you risk meeting another version of yourself, a life where your choices were different, where losses didn't happen, where you were maybe better or worse? The simple existence of this possibility changes what we understand as real, our history, our regrets, our plans, because if multiple versions of reality exist, then none are definitive, none are stable. Everything is constantly reconfiguring, and in the midst of this, only one thing remains: questioning, searching. Perhaps the answer to everything we are looking for is there, not on another planet, but in another universe. If there's even a chance that another version of everything is happening right now, then what else could be out there? What realities can we still not even imagine? What could be watching us while we believe we are the only ones? Now I want to hear from you. What mysterious hypothesis about the universe has crossed your mind? Any idea that no one has ever taken seriously, but that you feel might make sense? Comment here in the comments. I want to see the most intriguing, boldest, most impossible theories. Some of them can, yes, turn into something bigger here. On the channel, let's expand this conversation together, because sometimes the craziest questions hide the most valuable discoveries. Science has already seen the signs. It is up to us now to see what is ahead. The idea of parallel universes may seem distant, but perhaps what is really far away is our willingness to see beyond. And even without absolute proof, there is too much evidence for us to continue pretending that there isn't something strange going on. Do you believe that parallel universes exist? Have you ever felt something that you can't explain? Because if he felt, maybe it wasn't imagination, maybe it was just a reflex, coming from somewhere where everything happens differently. Now, if you're looking for more than ready-made answers, If you feel like there are still questions waiting for you out there or somewhere between the layers of this reality, you are already part of it. Subscribe to the channel. Being part of this journey is more than watching videos. It's following an investigation that has no end, where each theory takes you beyond what the eyes can perceive. Here, each doubt brings you closer to a new revelation. And what's to come? We'll challenge everything you think you know about the universe. Activate the bell so you don't miss any step of this exploration. Now, look at the video that is appearing on your screen. There is something there that could complete what you began to understand today, or perhaps open up a new, even more uncomfortable question. Click and continue, because while most people are still trying to understand what is happening, you've already started looking for where it all really begins.